Man United! Glory, glory, Man United!
Glory, glory, Man United, as the Reds go marching on!
Even though Manchester United has been longing for trophies in recent years, it is still among the most successful clubs in England today with its history. However, unfortunately, the days when United players were proud of their team seem like centuries ago. Maybe everyone predicted that things would be difficult, but I guess no one expected this much. Not only the good memories brought by success, but also the legacy of Ferguson and Sir Matt Busby, who laid the foundations of this culture before him, is in danger. This is not our topic today, or rather, it is this destroyed legacy. Why is Manchester United one of the greatest clubs in the world? How did they rise? How did they fall? How many years does it take to destroy a culture? And even more so, how long does it take to rebuild it? If you want to subscribe and like, maybe now is the time. Because we want to go on a journey in time. Manchester United won their last Premier League title nearly 11 years ago. Yes, maybe Manchester City is now the absolute ruler of the city and island football. However, despite all these years of failure, it is an interesting situation that the Red Devils are still respected so much around the world. Let's listen to Pep Guardiola, Michael Jordan, Julia Roberts, Manchester United. These are the peak. Glory, glory. Man United, one of the favorite songs of Old Trafford residents, continues to chase that glory. The word glory, which means resplendent, became almost the identity of the club in the last century. Coming to the reasons for this glory, Manchester United is one of the oldest known clubs in the history of football. It can easily be said that it is the oldest football club that has survived to this day. It was founded in 1878 by the transport and wagon departments of the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railways under the name Newton Heath. In 1902, it changed its name to Manchester United. On February 6, 1958, they experienced one of the most important breaking points in the history of the club with a great tragedy. The plane carrying the team crashed while trying to take off in Munich, where it had stopped for refueling on the way back from an away game against Red Star. In this tragic accident in which a total of 23 people lost their lives, United had to bid farewell to 8 players. After this incident, they became a club that the whole world looked upon with sympathy. Moreover, the only reason for this sympathy was not their losses. They managed to win the European Champions Club's Cup for the first time in their history, just 9 years after this incident. One of those who managed to survive the plane was Sir Bobby Charlton, who scored 2 goals in the final match against Benfica. What a story! Sir Matt Busby had built a great culture in this club with the academy he established, and the value he gave to young players. The young players he polished were known as Busby Babes. This culture, the foundations of which were laid by the Scottish football man, turned into a tradition over the years. Alex Ferguson, his compatriot who took office in 1986, opened a new golden page in the history of the club. Ferguson, just like his predecessor, doted on academy players. After the Busby Babes, Fergie's fledglings were now being talked about in island football. From Busby entering the doors in 1945 to Ferguson retiring in 2013, 52 of those 68 years bore the signature of these two Scots. 18 of the 20 league championships and 3 European victories that made them the most successful club on the island were won during this period. This traditionalist structure of the club also brought continuity. Players such as Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, and Ryan Giggs spent their entire careers at United. All 5 players with the most appearances in the club's history were academy graduates. During the Ferguson era, the number of players who served the club for more than 5 years was 46. The slogan, "Once a Red, always a Red," which became popular again with Cristiano Ronaldo's return, did not emerge by chance. Here we can understand the players' loyalty to the club. Manchester United was once at a completely different point in terms of player loyalty. These were the on-field factors that explained United's glory. Of course, there are also off-field factors. When we look at the old logos of the club, we see that the phrase "football club" was used consistently until 1998. Why do you think this phrase was suddenly removed in 98? Since the early 90s, football had begun to be seen as part of the entertainment industry. and the birth of the Premier League brand dates back to 1992. Manchester United was the first club to realize the financial potential it promised and move beyond being just a football club to become a giant international brand. Today, we tend to choose well-known brands even when buying a simple food product because we equate awareness with reliability. People trust brands. They even establish bonds with them. The impact of football clubs on consumers is an emotional bond that cannot be reached even through advertisements. Although the industrialization of football, or clubs starting to see their fans as customers, bothers some of us, this was now the new reality of the game. United, which adapted to this reality much earlier than its rivals, began to be managed with a new understanding from the beginning of the 21st century. Aiming to open up to different markets, the club organized tours to Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand in 2001, to the USA in 2004, and to Hong Kong, China, and Japan in 2005. One of the moves that took this strategy one step further was the transfer of South Korean footballer Park Ji-sung in 2005. Besides being a player Ferguson loved very much on the field, Park was a unique window that opened the Far East market for the club. During this period, the club made great progress in licensed product sales and brand awareness. From 2007 onwards, it did not fall from the top of Forbes magazine's World's Most Valuable Football Clubs list for 6 years. A balanced mixture of tradition and innovation kept them at the top. For many, the element that broke this delicately balanced mixture was the Glazer family, who stepped into the club in 2005. Interestingly, this story begins with a racehorse named Rock of Gibraltar. Sir Alex Ferguson was known for his interest in horse racing and had half ownership rights to this champion horse. However, Ferguson had a major disagreement with his partner John Magnier regarding the ownership of the horse, and they went to court. You might ask, what does this have to do with Manchester United or the Glazers? Magnier and his business partner J.P. McManus were the largest shareholders of Manchester United at that time. In other words, Ferguson was in court with his bosses. In this crisis environment, Malcolm Glazer, who entered the game by buying 2.9% of the club's shares, followed the developments closely and increased his shares to 30% within a year. In 2005, he convinced McManus and Magnier to buy their shares and took over the management. Glazer used the leveraged buyout method, borrowing against the club's own assets while purchasing it. In other words, he made the club go into debt to buy itself. For United fans, that day began to be remembered as the day of death for the club. The first period of the Glazer family was actually not bad in terms of sporting success. After all, Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill, who was at the head of football operations, were still at their jobs. They won 5 more Premier League championships until 2013 and played in the Champions League final 3 times. Brand value and revenues were increasing exponentially. United was literally printing money. However, the feared day arrived in June 2013. Ferguson ended his 26-year career, and David Gill left his post. This situation was a big problem for the Glazer family, who had always left football decisions to this duo. The Americans' knowledge of this game was extremely limited. Worst of all was that they made no effort to learn. For them, United was no different from other businesses they owned, and they measured success only by money. The fact that the NFL team Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Glazer management won championships 18 years apart might satisfy them, but the dynamics of football were different. The expertise of Ed Woodward, who was appointed to manage football operations instead of David Gill, was tax consultancy and accounting. His vision was no different from the Glazer family. This was the real reason for United's collapse, being forced to make decisions about a game they did not understand and actually did not care much about. The club, which worked with only 17 managers in 121 years, an average of 7 years, began to change coaches rapidly after 2013. During the Woodward era, more than 1.8 billion euros were spent on transfers. Angel Di Maria, Paul Pogba, Romelu Lukaku, Harry Maguire, Jadon Sancho, and Antony each was transferred for fees over 60 million euros. Which of these players met expectations? I leave the decision to you. The academy, which was the pride of the club, was far from its former productivity. Those children carrying the club's spirit, who kept the team alive during the Ferguson era, were no longer emerging as often. Cristiano Ronaldo, in his famous interview, emphasized that nothing had changed in the club since Ferguson retired. Even the facilities remained the same. The Glazer brothers were more interested in selling shares and making money than investing in the club. Fans' protests, on the other hand, remained ineffective at some point due to ownership rights. Finally, in the last days of 2023, British businessman Sir Jim Ratcliffe signed an agreement to take over all football operations by purchasing 25% of the club's shares. Since Ratcliffe is a trusted name, fans look to the future with more hope. The fact that the Glazers sold only 25% of the club, which they bought entirely for about £800 million in 2005, for over £1 billion shows how much financial profit they have made. However, they left behind a very worn-out club, from its facilities to its stadium, from its fans to its museum. A club structure can be changed in a short time, but a culture could only be destroyed this much. Now, residents of Old Trafford have this question in mind. How long will it take to rebuild that club culture that carried us to the top? How long will it take us to return to the glorious days?